A Glance in the Mirror, Chapter 26, Going Courting. It was quite a shock for Terry to go back to his old job. By 1956 there had been many changes to the printing industry since his departure 2 years before. These were technical innovations by the film manufacturers. Three main factors transformed the reproduction of pictures: the manufacture of large studio cameras, film manufacturers producing 60 by 40 films with a stable backing, and colour masking to compensate for the spectral deficiencies of the printing inks. Photographic processes made great inroads into hand-drawn reproductions within a few years. This heralded the end to fine art posters on station platforms, tea shops and poster hoardings. Customers were now obsessed with photography and the screened image. Advertising agencies sold hoarding space to clients on the strength that they should use the latest technology to keep up with all that is new. Post-war publishers relied upon letterpress to produce the bulk of general printing work. This includes newspapers and book production. Print runs for popular magazines became the prerogative of gravure printing, simply because the gravure cylinder retained the image longer without changing. Lithography produced greetings cards, wrapping paper, labels and posters, whilst screen process concentrated on signs and shop counter goods and packaging. And it didn't take long for all this to change, as new technologies came into being and working practices became adopted to suit. The first process to fill the pinch was letterpress. Handset type, superseded by hot metal, in turn gave way to photographic typesetting. Planned films, incorporating half-tone pictures and type matter, exposed onto light-sensitive metal plates, became faster to change than the letterpress forms. Film and a lot cheaper to use and store than metal. The lithographic presses were cheaper to run than rotary gravure, now that a new set of plates became cheaper to remake. Terry didn't want to return to college or evening class. He quickly found all his old skills returning, able to keep up with fully trained journeymen. He was now paid £19 for a 45-hour week with 2 weeks holiday. There was more talk about changes coming along now that new large format films were coming onto the market. A number of posters were being produced using black and white photographs as their main subject. The camera department was now having a makeover, having larger sinks installed to take dishes capable of taking the larger size films. 2 years before, there had been very few union disputes. Men were returning home from the war, and life returning to how they had been pre-war. Houses had to be repaired, furniture brought up to date, and children catered for. Now, 5 years later, in 1955, the unions were conscious that wages had to keep pace with the cost of living, and workers had greater expectations now, demanding an improved lifestyle with longer holidays. The dockers were complaining about age-old methods of unloading ships. The transport and general workers' closed shop arrangements were being challenged by the Dock Labour Board. The electrical trade unions refused to maintain the newspaper printing presses, and the locomotive engineers demanded a wage increase from the Transport Commission. It was constant friction throughout the 50s, spelt the eventual demise of Britain's industrial sector over a 20-year period from which it has never returned. Terry was still living with his parents. The journey to work was the same from North Harrow to Neasden Station, then a 7-minute walk to Cromer Works. On many occasions Ken Pierce, who had attended the same school, gave him a lift in his new Ford Popular, a car bought for him by his father for just under £500. Ken worked in the drawing office of British Thompson Houston, an electrical firm dealing with switchgear. They gave up many of their Friday evenings to dancing at the Wembley Town Hall, to such bands as Ted Heath, Ken Mackintosh, Eric Delaney, Jack Parnell, Johnny Dankworth, and the resident band of Lou Stone. Most Saturdays they went to the pictures, for Ken was good company. They chatted away, covering most subjects, enjoying similar things. Film-goers reached a peak in 1946, when 1/3 of the population was going at least once a week. The Korean and Malayan War, national service, new public dance routines, and television audiences steadily lowered the graph until the low cinema audiences began to threaten their very existence. Through the interest of a fellow workmate, Terry bought himself a black, rigid-framed, single-cylinder 350cc AJS from Pink's of Harrow. This faithful steed took him to work in all weathers. He kept it for a couple of years under a tarpaulin in the backyard, stripping it down and polishing it, believing he was increasing its speed with every change of oil. Unfortunately, this never happened. It only ever did 60 miles an hour, with his head down, throttle fully opened, and a following wind. Printing was not the only industry to feel competition from abroad, all lagging behind emerging Far East companies. Cars and motorbikes, their production boomed, as did the manufacture of components and accessories, but not for long. Honda soon showed the way to modern machine production, leaving the old BSA Bantam well behind. Hire purchase businesses doubled and house building soared. Television competed with radio and cinema, and won. Independent television began in 1954, extended 10 years later whilst increasing its membership. There was a large-scale immigration from the West Indies, quickly absorbed by the railways. Overtime by the nation's workforce was an accepted way of raising one's living standard. Ken and Terry continued meeting up, neither finding a girlfriend. They arranged their evenings together when meeting up during lunch, both firms having the same lunch break. They arranged to spend Christmas Eve at the town hall dance. He would give Terry a lift, and as usual his car turned up at the appointed hour, and in Terry got, scrubbed clean and slicked down, wearing his new sports coat. As this was a special occasion, the car park was almost full, but Ken managed to find a spot. They quickly walked up the steps and braved the loungers' stares as they bought their tickets. The dance floor was certainly the largest in the vicinity. As a venue, it lacked the intimate atmosphere. The floor was so large that before the next dance there was this enormous void in the centre of the floor which, to find a partner, you had to negotiate. When Terry did pluck up enough courage to strike out across the floor towards a likely girl, he wondered whether his appearance was inviting or off-putting, whether he should swing his arms or nonchalantly saunter over with a confident swagger, one hand in pocket. It was equally daunting when asking for a dance, the girl saying, "I'm sorry, I'm waiting for a partner," "I'm sitting this one out," or "I promised this one to somebody else." The poor rejected soul had either to creep away and ask somebody nearby, which never produced a good result, or carry on walking to the bar as if it had been his original idea in the first place. There was a distinct advantage to leaping to one's feet as soon as the next dance was called, so that you had the best choice of partner. However, that needed courage in the face of the enemy and total exposure. The girls who were the prettiest and could dance the best were always the most sought after. Without prior intelligence work, you might be fooled into making the wrong choice, and then you had to stagger around with the room with someone who had 2 left feet, or had little or no conversation, or worse still, just did not want to dance at all. The whole object of the exercise was to find a girl to take home, be your date. The last waltz concluded every dance. There was a mad rush to find a partner. It was the most important part of the whole evening, not to be left out, especially whilst the other fellow was dancing close, burying their face in the girl's hair, whilst you had to go and collect your coat and face the cold. Terry looked round. Yes, there was someone in the crowd who might be suitable. He made his way over. "Would you like to dance?" Her reply, yes, took Terry by surprise. They took to the floor. It seemed to go quite well. She danced easily. They chatted about the band, the choice of music, and her preferences for dances. It was the best dance of the evening, and Terry asked if he could see her home. At this she replied that her friend was with her, and they had come together, and it wouldn't be right to leave her alone. Terry immediately asked her name, and wondered if she would like to go to the Christmas Eve dance above the Regal Cinema the following Saturday. She said her name was Sally, and that yes, she would love to go. And with that, the first meeting was arranged. Christmas Eve at 7. The future ordained by such rare events. How he contained himself he never knew. But eventually the great day arrived, and they met up. The evening was a success. It had been Terry's greatest worry that they might not get on. The conversation would be stilted and time drag. It was neither. It was a most enjoyable evening, and for the first time Terry felt at ease and more sure of himself. He walked her home, which was over a mile. Time passed quickly, the parting kisses a delight, and they said good night, arranging to meet up a few days later after the Christmas festivities. Terry walked on air back home over Harrow Hill, past the cottage hospital, over the crossroads along the Ridgeway, whistling a happy tune, at peace with the world, as if in a dream. Their meeting and subsequent dance and comfortableness together convinced Terry their developing friendship was special. Their shared interests cemented a feeling of being at one. Those moments when conversation was stilled, it was less stressful and more comfortable than any other shared moment with previous partners. He didn't think that it was because he was becoming more adept, although getting older in itself would naturally do that. It was obviously his new friend, who was more mature, experienced, and wholly natural. From that time on, they saw each other at least twice a week, and gradually Terry got to know her parents and their son, Roger. It was comfortable, so easy to be included in the circle and become part of their family life. Sally was born on the 14th of March, 1932, to Harry and Rita Morgan, née Hutchins, at a nursing home in Chichester. Sally's father, born in 1899, served during the First World War in Mesopotamia in the signalling section. Harry appears in my memory as being slightly taller than Terry. Therefore, he was all of 6 foot, weighing 12.5 stone. He was a Welshman, born and bred in Neath, South Wales. A head of thick, grey, wiry hair, combed in a neat central parting. A grey moustache set off a cheerful, lined, weather-beaten face, more often than not wreathed in a smile. He was an inveterate smoker of Balkan Soprani cigarettes, which he inhaled with relish, letting the smoke pass out through his teeth. This habit perfectly conjures up how he viewed life, particularly away from his work. For him, a chore. He tried to be enthusiastic about all that he did, had distinct views of most aspects of life, which he propounded, looking over the rim of his glasses and the Times newspaper. It was this paper's crossword which gave him his main form of relaxation. Harry was a rugby fanatic, especially Welsh rugby, at Cardiff Arms Park. Having been born in Neath, South Wales, he never ceased to extol the virtues of either the country or its citizens. To him, Dylan Thomas was its chief bard. He often recited Under Milkwood, declared the Welsh anthem, Men of Harlech, the only piece of great music worth listening to, and the Welsh hills, God's chosen landscape. He firmly believed the harp the only instrument worth listening to, the Welsh flag the only flag worth flying, and the language of angels. He was, you will gather, a Welshman through and through. When Terry first knew him, he was the manager of Lloyd's Bank, Greenford, and considered his staff to be his main concern over all others. Throughout all his years, working his way up from cashier to manager, he had been a dedicated member of staff. Harry became disenchanted with modern banking methods. He disliked the bank's head office strictures, which required new goals to be set for taking on new clients, continually increased his targets of how much money the bank took in. Harry considered all this pressure took away from him his freedom to act for the local community, severing his personal relationships with many of his clients whom he considered his friends. He was a member of the local Rotary Club and participated in their charity work, but couldn't wait to retire from the bank so that he could watch cricket at Lord's, westerns on television, and go cycling. Harry wasn't a practical man, but proud. When he had wired up an electric plug or mended a puncture, he was literate and enjoyed going to the theatre. Financially prudent, he appreciated and planned for the simple life, the delights of the English countryside and good company. He mostly wore light grey suits and striped shirts, and to my memory never wore a hat, nor ever wanted to. He was not somebody who would knowingly harm you or anyone else, swear at you, raise his voice, or find fault. He was gentle in all things. His wife Rita, née Hutchins, hailed from Woking, where the family ran the local coal merchants. They had met whilst Harry was chief cashier at the Chichester branch of Lloyd's Bank. Rita worked as a librarian at the county library. They both had an interest in local amateur theatre groups, which is where they met. Her father moved out of the family home when she was young, forcing the mother to raise the three girls on her own. This event affected her sister Grace, who thought little of her father for deserting her mother and children for another woman. Rita had been a star pupil at school, winning numerous prizes, which also upset her sister, who tried much harder in her work but didn't receive due reward or recognition. Rita was only about 5 feet 4 inches tall and slight of frame, but very strong-willed, determined and resolute, totally believing in women's liberation in all its forms. She was perceptive and relished testing other people's opinions and reactions, and once set on a task she persevered until finished. Rita was a home builder and delighted in keeping up with the latest fashions, not popular mass market fashions, but the style of the arts and craft movement. The home in Sudbury Hill was always immaculate. The furniture was mostly of polished wood, and the chairs had loose plain covers. Her favourite colour was green, which showed in the colours of the carpets and drapery, and most of the curtains she made up herself, taking great pains to ensure that the hanging lengths were perfect, and it became part of Terry's contribution to help her put up the fixtures and fittings. The dining room held the piano, Rita's cello, music stand, and a set of recorders. Music was piled on the top of the piano, in the stool, and on a small table. The French doors with Georgian lights allowed light to fall onto the dining table of polished light oak. The heel and sun furniture included 6 matching chairs and 2 carvers arranged around the table. The turned posts have pinnacle tops and 2 sets of stretchers, rush-woven seats and scalloped ladder backs. The fire, lit for the occasion, flickered in the hearth, supplementing the small table lamps on the window-sills. Monet and Pissarro prints looked down on the assembled company. The tea service, taken out of the matching oak sideboard, was carefully laid on the table. It was thus on every occasion.